My daughter-in-law brought me coffee every day, a perfect ritual of her care for me. But a scribbled note from a homeless boy warned me not to drink it, exposing a terrifying plot to systematically erase my mind. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. The brass key slipped from my fingers, hitting the stone porch of my Chestnut Hill row house with a sharp, bright clink. I stared at it, my mind a full second behind my hand. That was the third time this week. A hot flush of shame and frustration crept up my neck. I bent to pick it up, my knuckles white, just as a whisper-quiet electric car, the color of champagne, pulled up to the curb. My daughter-in-law, Serena, stepped out. She didn't sigh, but her silence was louder than a sigh. It was the sound of patient, rehearsed pity. "Martha, you should have waited. I was right here," she called, her voice bright and melodic, a sound designed to soothe. She was already halfway up the walk, holding the familiar polished silver thermos. It was a daily symbol of her devotion. I finally jammed the key into the lock and twisted. "Just a senior moment, dear," I muttered, pushing the heavy door open. "Of course," she said, gliding past me into the foyer. Her perfume filled the air, expensive and clean, like white lilies and steel. "That's why I'm here. I brought your coffee." This was the ritual, the anchor of my days. At 68, my life, once defined by the chaotic symphony of a busy social work office, had settled into a quiet, predictable rhythm. The loudest sound in my house was usually the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock my late husband, Robert, had cherished. Serena was, by all accounts, the perfect daughter-in-law, impeccably dressed, professionally successful, and relentlessly attentive. She managed my doctor's appointments, sorted my medications into little plastic boxes, and spoke to me with a patient, gentle tone one might use for a beloved, slightly fragile antique. My son, David, a good man with a heart full of love and a mind full of his wife's opinions, saw these daily visits as proof of Serena's saintliness. "She worries about you, Mom," he'd said on our last weekly phone call, his voice brimming with that earnest love I adored. "I told you she was one of the good ones. She wants to make sure you're taken care of." I knew he was right. I was lucky. In the kitchen, Serena poured the steaming, fragrant liquid into my favorite ceramic mug, the one with the slightly chipped rim that Robert had given me on our 20th anniversary. She placed it in my hands, her own fingers cool and manicured. "A touch of cinnamon," she chirped, "from that special blend in the historic district. Just how you like it." I smiled and took a sip. It was warm and sweet, and within 20 minutes, I knew the fogginess would come. It was a familiar, unwelcome visitor, a soft, suffocating blanket that settled over my afternoons, making it difficult to concentrate on my book or even follow the plot of a television show. It was my age, they said, a natural, inevitable decline. But lately, underneath the gratitude, a strange feeling had begun to fester, a quiet wrongness. It was the sense of being managed, handled. My own competence, the very quality that had defined my 40-year career, was being gently and lovingly eroded. I felt managed. I felt handled. But I was lucky. Serena said so. The next day, I stepped out of the black car service onto the bustling sidewalk near University Hospital. Serena had, of course, arranged it. My routine cardiology checkup. The city air hit me, exhaust and roasted nuts, and the chaotic energy of 1,000 lives intersecting. I missed it. The appointment was fast. My doctor, a sharp woman half my age, smiled as she read the chart. "Whatever you're doing, Martha, keep doing it. Your heart is as strong as ever." The words echoed as I walked out into the cold afternoon air. Strong as ever. Then why did I feel like I was fading? Why did I need my daughter-in-law to remind me of my own appointments, to refill my prescriptions, to bring me coffee as if I were an invalid? I decided to walk, to feel the city's pulse in a way I hadn't in a while. I needed to feel my own mind, the sharp, clear mind that had once managed a caseload of 50 families, the one that could de-escalate a crisis with just a few words. That's when I saw him. He was huddled in the doorway of a closed bookstore. Young, no older than 19 or 20. He wasn't holding a sign or asking for money. He was just sitting, a study in forced invisibility, watching the river of humanity flow past, pretending he didn't exist. My career had taught me to see the people everyone else looks through. This wasn't the vacant look of someone lost to drugs. It was the sharp, weary look of a survivor. I stopped. The river of pedestrians parted around me, annoyed by the disruption. "Excuse me," I said, my voice soft. His eyes flickered up, shocked to be addressed. "It's a cold day," I said. "Have you had anything hot to eat?" He shook his head, a barely perceptible motion. He seemed to be bracing himself for a lecture, for the inevitable "get a job." I didn't offer one. I opened my purse and took out a crisp $20 bill. "Go get yourself a hot meal," I said, holding it out to him. "There's a good diner a couple of blocks from here. Get the soup. It'll warm you up." He stared at the money, then at my face, his expression shifting from suspicion to a raw, unguarded bewilderment. He reached out a grimy hand and took the bill, his fingers brushing against mine. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rough from disuse. "What's your name?" I asked. "Jamal," he said. "Stay warm, Jamal," I said, giving him a small smile. I turned to walk away, feeling that familiar mix of sadness for his situation and a quiet satisfaction for having made a small human connection. I had only taken a few steps when I heard a frantic shuffling sound behind me. "Ma'am, wait!" I turned. It was Jamal. He was on his feet now, his eyes wide with a desperate, terrifying urgency. He rushed toward me, and for a fleeting second, a flicker of city dwellers' fear went through me. But his face held no malice, only panic. He glanced nervously over his shoulder, as if he were being watched. "I saw you," he said, his words coming out in a rush. "At the cafe, the one with the tables outside, the courtyard cafe. Your daughter, the fancy lady in the nice coat. I see her there sometimes." I frowned, confused. "My daughter-in-law? Serena?" "Yes." His eyes darted around the crowded street. He fumbled in the pocket of his torn jacket and pulled out a crumpled, greasy napkin. He pressed it into my hand, his own hand trembling. "Please," he whispered, his voice so low I could barely hear him over the traffic. "Don't let her see you with this. Just read it. Please. You have to believe me." Before I could ask what he was talking about, he turned and darted back into the anonymity of the crowd, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the warm, grimy napkin clutched in my hand. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. I walked another block, my mind reeling, before I ducked into the quiet lobby of an office building. My hands shook as I unfolded the napkin. The words were scribbled in a frantic, messy hand, written with a pen that was running out of ink. But the message was clear. It was a message that defied all logic, a message that belonged in a cheap thriller, not in my quiet, well-ordered life. Your daughter-in-law put something in your coffee. Don't drink it. The world seemed to tilt and spin. The words on the greasy napkin were an absurdity, a cruel, nonsensical joke. Serena, my Serena, the woman who fussed over my health, who reminded me to take my vitamins, who treated me with such suffocating, relentless care. The idea was preposterous. It was the paranoid delusion of a troubled young man on the street. It had to be. My logical mind fought for control. But my other mind, the mind of a social worker who had spent 40 years looking into the eyes of frightened people, couldn't let it go. I thought of Jamal's face, the raw, genuine terror in his eyes. It was a look I had seen 100 times. It was the look of a child about to testify against an abusive parent. It was the look of someone telling a dangerous, unbelievable truth. My mind raced, replaying the last few months, the fogginess, the lethargy, the senior moments that seemed to be getting more frequent. I had accepted my own decline so easily. I had let them convince me that I was fading. What if it wasn't my mind? What if it was the coffee? A cold dread settled in my chest. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. I had to make a choice. Trust Serena, the perfect daughter-in-law, and dismiss this as a madman's raving. Or trust the terrified eyes of a homeless boy and accept that my entire world was a carefully constructed lie. I walked out of the building. My car service was waiting. As I sank into the leather seat, I folded the napkin and tucked it deep into my purse. It felt like a live grenade. I had made my decision. I would trust the warning. The drive home was a blur. The familiar streets of my neighborhood seemed alien and menacing. By the time I walked through my front door, my heart was a cold, heavy stone. I had less than an hour until 3 p.m. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked. Each sound was a hammer blow, counting down. I walked into my kitchen, my movements stiff and automatic. I was no longer an aging mother-in-law. I was an actor preparing for the most difficult role of her life, the role of the unsuspecting, slightly dotty old woman. My stage was my own home. My audience was the woman who was either my loving caregiver or a monster of unimaginable cruelty. I took a mug from the cabinet, a plain one, not Robert's, and made a cup of instant coffee. It was lukewarm and bitter. I hid it behind the fruit bowl on the counter. At precisely 3:00, the doorbell rang. I took a deep, shaky breath and pasted a warm, welcoming smile on my face. "It's open, dear," I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally high. Serena swept in, a vision of casual elegance in a cashmere coat, holding the familiar silver thermos. "I brought your coffee, Martha," she chirped. "It's a bit chilly out there today. I thought you could use something to warm you up." "You are a lifesaver, Serena," I said. My words felt like ash in my mouth. I was just starting to feel a bit sluggish. She followed me into the kitchen, her expensive perfume filling the air. As she turned to take off her coat and hang it on the back of a chair, my moment came. My back was to her. My hands were trembling so violently, I was afraid I would drop the mug. I took the chipped ceramic mug, Robert's mug, that she always used for me. I held it over the sink. I poured the entire contents of the steaming, fragrant liquid she had just handed me directly down the drain. The dark, fragrant liquid vanished down the stainless steel drain with a quiet, sickening gurgle. I quickly turned on the tap, washing away any lingering traces. I grabbed my hidden prop, the lukewarm instant coffee, and poured it into Robert's mug. The entire operation had taken less than 10 seconds. It was the longest 10 seconds of my life. By the time Serena turned back around, I was holding my mug, a placid smile on my face. "There we go," she said, her smile never faltering. "You just relax, Martha. You look a little tired today. Let me tell you about the new charity gala I'm organizing." For the next 45 minutes, I sat and listened. I nodded and smiled. I sipped the bitter, lukewarm instant coffee, pretending it was the delicious, cinnamon-laced brew she believed I was drinking. And I watched her. I really watched her. I was no longer a passive recipient of her care. I was a social worker again, observing a client, looking for the cracks in the carefully constructed facade. And for the first time, I could see them. I noticed the way her eyes would occasionally flicker to my mug, a quick, almost imperceptible glance to see if I was drinking. I noticed the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Her kindness felt like a weapon. Her attentiveness felt like surveillance. When she finally stood up to leave, I felt a wave of relief so powerful my knees felt weak. "You finish up your coffee, Martha," she said, patting my shoulder with those cool, manicured fingers. "It'll do you good. I'll see you tomorrow." "Thank you, dear," I said, my voice a weak whisper. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The lie tasted like poison. The moment the front door clicked shut, my performance ended. I slumped in my chair, my body shaking with a mixture of terror and adrenaline. But the work wasn't done. I walked over to the thermos she had left on the counter, as she always did. My logical mind, now fully awake and fighting back, took over. I couldn't destroy the evidence. I had to preserve it. I carefully unscrewed the lid. The smell hit me. Cinnamon, yes, but underneath, something else. A faint, bitter, chemical tang. I poured the remaining coffee down the drain, watching the dark liquid swirl away. Then I held the thermos upside down, letting the last few drops collect in the lid. I noticed it then, a faint, almost invisible residue clinging to the bottom of the stainless steel interior. It was a pale, chalky substance that didn't look like it belonged in coffee. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was real. This was happening. I rummaged through my cabinets, my hands still shaking. I found a small, clean glass jar, the kind I used for making jam. With the steady hand of a scientist, I rinsed the thermos with a tiny amount of distilled water, just enough to collect the residue. I swirled the water around, making sure it picked up every last particle, and then poured the cloudy liquid into the jam jar. I screwed the lid on tight, my movements precise and deliberate. I labeled the jar with a piece of masking tape. Coffee sample, Serena Hayes. The act of writing her name, of formally identifying her as the source of this potential poison, was a chilling, definitive step. There was no going back now. I thought immediately of Dr. Anna Sharma, a brilliant, no-nonsense toxicologist who had often consulted on my most difficult child welfare cases. We had retired a few years apart, but remained close. I picked up the phone. What would I say? "Anya, can you test my coffee? I think my daughter-in-law is poisoning me." It sounded like the ravings of a lunatic. But what was the alternative? To do nothing? To let my son be convinced I needed to be put in a home, with Serena graciously managing my assets? The thought was a splash of ice water in my face. I dialed. "Martha, what a nice surprise." Anna's warm, familiar voice answered. "Anya, I need your help," I said, my own voice tight and strained. "I have a favor to ask, a strange one, and I need you to promise me you'll keep it between us." There was a pause. Anna's tone shifted from friendly to professional. "Of course, Martha. What's going on?" "I have a sample, a liquid. I need to know what's in it," I said, the words feeling inadequate and insane. "I can't explain everything right now, but it's important. Life or death, important." The waiting was a special kind of torment. I spent the next 24 hours pacing the length of my living room, a prisoner in my own home. Every tick of the grandfather clock felt like a hammer blow. Every ring of the phone made me jump. I couldn't eat. I couldn't read. I had met Anna at a neutral coffee shop, not my home, and handed over the small, sealed jam jar. I tried to ignore the look of deep, professional concern in her eyes. She hadn't asked questions I couldn't answer. 20 years of working in the trenches together had forged a bond that transcended polite inquiries. She knew a crisis when she saw one. The call came just after dusk. The sky outside my window was a bruised, heavy purple. Martha. Anna's voice was grim. All traces of warmth were gone. Are you sitting down? I sank into the wingback chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Yes. The sample you gave me, she began, and I could hear the rustle of a paper report. It contained a significant concentration of xylopram. I've changed the name of the drug for privacy. Xylopram? I'm not prescribed that. I know, Anna said. It's a powerful sedative, usually prescribed for severe, short-term insomnia. But the dosage, Martha, it's been manipulated, and it was mixed with a binding agent that makes it dissolve almost completely in hot liquid. Very sophisticated. A sedative, I whispered, my throat dry. So she was just trying to make me tired? It's more than that, Martha, Anna said, her voice low and serious. At this sustained daily dosage, xylopram has a very specific, very nasty side effect. It doesn't just make you tired. It induces a state of profound cognitive disruption, confusion, short-term memory loss, lethargy, paranoia. She paused, letting the words sink in. Martha, a person taking this every day would present with all the classic textbook symptoms of a rapid, aggressive onset of dementia. The room went silent. The only sound was the frantic, paper-thin beating of my own heart. It wasn't old age. It wasn't my mind failing. It was Serena. She wasn't trying to kill me. She was trying to erase me. She was methodically, scientifically, and lovingly turning me into a feeble-minded old woman who couldn't be trusted to manage her own life. She was building a cage of symptoms around me. The senior moments, the fogginess, the missed appointments she had to helpfully manage. She wasn't just observing my decline. She was manufacturing it. And my son, my loving, trusting son, was her primary witness. He was helping her lock the door. The sheer diabolical evil of it took my breath away. It was a perfect, untraceable crime, with my own body as the evidence. The rage, when it came, was a cleansing fire. It burned away the fear, the doubt, the grief. It left behind a cold, hard clarity. This was no longer a suspicion. This was a war. And I, Martha Hayes, was not going to be a casualty. I was going to be the general. My mind, the sharp strategic mind that had been clouded for months, was suddenly crystal clear. A simple accusation was useless. She would twist it. She would turn it back on me, use it as further proof of my paranoia. Just as that cold, clear thought formed, my phone buzzed on the table beside me. It was a new text message. From Serena. Hi, Martha. I'm so glad I caught you. I was just talking to David, and we're both so worried about your fogginess lately. I know you've been resistant, but I took the liberty of finally scheduling a little memory assessment for you. With a Dr. Evans. He's simply the best, a personal friend, and he's agreed to fit you in. A doctor? The name was unfamiliar. He's at the new medical tower. I'll pick you up next Tuesday at 2 p.m. David is going to meet us there. It's for the best. We love you. A cold dread washed over me, far colder than the fear of the poison. I realized the full, terrifying scope of her plan. This wasn't just about drugging my coffee. She was already building the case against me. She had been for months. She wasn't just hoping I'd fade. She was creating a false, fraudulent medical history to prove it. The lab results were my truth. But Serena was building her own. I had the proof, but I suddenly realized proof wasn't enough. I had the what? The cloudy liquid in Anna's lab report. I had the who, Serena, the smiling angel with the pharmacist's cold precision, but I had no how, no link between the two. A good lawyer, and Serena would have the best, would paint me as a paranoid, vengeful old woman. Jamal. Jamal was the link. He was the only one who had seen the act. But finding him again, That was the problem. He wasn't a reliable witness. He was a ghost. I went back downtown the next day. The bookstore doorway was empty. A cold panic hit me. What if he was gone for good? I checked the diner, flashing his $20 tip from the day before, but the waitress just shook her head. I spent the next 2 hours walking, my old social worker instincts kicking in. I knew the shelters in this area, the drop-in centers. I knew the invisible map of the streets. It was getting dark, the air colder. A micro clock was ticking, not just for me, but for him. Another night on the street could mean anything. I talked to a few other kids huddled under an awning. Jamal? Yeah, sharp kid. Kinda quiet. He sometimes hangs by the bus station. I found him at the Greyhound station, not inside, but huddled behind a bus stop shelter, trying to block the wind. He was shivering, his coat pulled tight. He saw me, and his eyes went wide, not with relief, but with pure fear. "Ma'am, you can't be here," he whispered, standing up, his whole body tense. He tried to move past me, to blend into the shadows. "You shouldn't have come back. That lady, if she's connected." I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "She is, Jamal, but not in the way you think." "She's powerful," he said, his voice desperate. "I know her type. They look right through you, but they see everything. If she sees you with me." "She won't," I said, my voice firm, but my heart was breaking for him. This kid was terrified, and he had still chosen to warn me. "Jamal, what you did, you saved my life, but I need your help one more time. I'm in a trap." This was the vulnerability ping. I was no longer a benefactor. I was asking for help. "She's trying to make people think I'm crazy," I said, my voice dropping. "She's drugging me to make me forgetful. She's trying to take everything from me, starting with my own mind. That note you gave me? It's the only thing that saved me. But I'm one old woman against her and my son. They won't believe me." He searched my face, his sharp eyes reading me, weighing the risk. I wasn't just a rich lady. I was a target, just like him, only in a different jungle. "Why should I?" he asked, not with malice, but with the blunt calculus of survival. "You're rich. She's rich. I'm this. What happens to me when she finds out I talked?" "Because she looks at people like they're bugs," I said, echoing his own thoughts. "And you and we're the bugs. You are right to be scared. She is dangerous, but I'm not going to let her win." I reached into my purse, but this time I didn't pull out money. I pulled out a piece of paper with my name and Anna's address. "This is a friend of mine. She runs a clinic. You go there, you ask for her, you say Martha sent me. There's a warm room and a hot meal, and no one will find you. I'm not asking you to testify, not yet. I'm just asking you to tell me exactly what you saw." He took the paper, his fingers cold. He was quiet for a long moment. "She looks at you, but she looks past you," he finally whispered. "But you saw me. You talked to me. You gave me that $20 and you didn't look away." This was the payoff, kindness as a weapon. He took a deep breath. "The Courtyard Cafe. She's there most afternoons. Around 2, before she comes to your house. She sits at one of the outside tables even when it's cold." He leaned in, his voice dropping. "She thinks she's slick. She buys a coffee, but she doesn't drink it. She sits by the big window. She uses the glass, like a mirror, to watch her back, to see if anyone in the cafe is looking." My blood ran cold. This was no amateur. "Then she takes a little pill bottle out of her purse. A brown one. She unscrews it. She crushes them up, right there at the table with the back of a spoon. She stirs the powder into that silver thermos." This was the method. This was the evidence I needed. This was the link. He looked at me, his eyes certain, the terror replaced by a hard, cold anger. I've seen her do it. More than once. The Tuesday assessment with Dr. Evans was a ticking bomb. Serena was escalating. She was moving from quiet, chemical gaslighting to an overt administrative attack. She was building a paper trail. I had to dismantle her case before she could build it. I spent Monday on a new kind of war. I was no longer just a target. I was an investigator. I sat at my dining room table, the chipped mug, now clean and safe, beside me. I started with Dr. Evans. I searched the state medical board. No license. I searched the address Serena had so helpfully texted me. It wasn't a medical office. It was a virtual office solutions building, a place that sold P.O. boxes and hourly conference rooms. This wasn't just a friend. This was a fraud, an actor. My 40 years as a social worker had left me with contacts. I called Charlie, a retired PI I used to use on my toughest child welfare cases, the ones where fathers disappeared to avoid child support. "Charlie, it's Martha Hayes," I said. "I need a name on a corporate P.O. box, and I need it yesterday." He grumbled, but I knew he'd do it. He called back in an hour. "It's not a doctor, Martha," he said, his voice gravelly. "It's a guy named Mark Jennings, 35, rents a mailbox by the month. You want the good part? He's a non-union actor. Got a DUI last year, lost his car. He's desperate for cash." A desperate actor. Serena hadn't just found a friend, she had cast a part. A new, colder, more audacious plan began to form. This was a huge risk. I couldn't just call him. I couldn't threaten him. Serena's money was a better shield than my threats. I had to turn him. I went to an electronics store. I bought a small, sleek digital recorder, the size of a thumb drive. Charlie had given me Mark's home address. It was a rundown walk-up apartment building across town, the kind of place with flickering fluorescent lights in the hallway and the smell of stale cooking. I knocked. The man who opened the door was in his 30s, wearing a faded t-shirt, with the desperate, haunted look of someone whose dreams had curdled. He saw a well-dressed 68-year-old woman and was instantly confused. "Mark Jennings?" I asked. He nodded, wary. "I'm Martha Hayes," I said. His face drained of all color. He knew my name. He knew exactly who I was. He tried to slam the door. I put my hand flat against it, my social worker, I am not to be trifled with voice locking into place. "Don't. You'll only make it worse." He was weak, and he was terrified. He backed away, letting me into his small, messy apartment. "I'm not here to debate," I said, my voice cold and steady as ice. I was reading the room, and the room screamed panic. "I'm here to offer you a choice. Serena Hayes is poisoning me with the controlled substance to mimic the symptoms of dementia. I have the toxicology report from a certified lab." I let that hang in the air. His eyes were wide. "You," I continued, "are a witting or unwitting accessory to aggravated assault, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit fraud. That's a 10-year mandatory minimum in this state. Or you can help me." He collapsed onto a stool, his head in his hands. She told me you were just confused," he stammered. "She said you were paranoid, that it was a concerned family intervention to get your son to see. She said you were a danger to yourself." He was sobbing, a terrible, weak sound. "She paid me $5,000, he whispered, a full confession. "She said all I had to do was run a few fake tests and tell her son she needed full-time management." He looked up at me, his face a mask of pathetic terror. "What do I have to do?" The actor was mine. He was terrified, which made him pliable. He was far more afraid of a 10-year prison sentence than he was of Serena. "You're going to do 2 things," I told him, my voice cold. I was no longer a victim. I was managing a case. First, you're going to tell me everything. Second, you're going to make a phone call. He confessed it all. It was worse than I thought. Serena had found him through a casting website 3 months ago. The plan was to create a paper trail of my escalating dementia. The Tuesday meeting wasn't the first step. It was the final phase. He was supposed to meet with me and David, then recommend an immediate petition for conservatorship to protect my assets. Her words. She said David was too soft. Mark whispered, wiping his face. She needed a medical authority to convince him it was time. My blood ran cold. She wasn't just gaslighting me. She was planning a full-blown legal coup. Good, I said, my voice void of emotion. Now, the phone call. I took out the digital recorder and set it on his coffee table. I gave him a script I had written in the car. You're going to call Serena. You're going to confirm your strategy for tomorrow's meeting. You're going to do it on speakerphone. And this is going to be listening. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely dial. The phone picked up on the second ring. Mark. Serena's voice, crisp and all business. The gentle, caring chirp was gone. Hi, Serena, he stammered. It's Mark, Dr. Evans. I'm just reviewing my notes for the meeting tomorrow. I want to confirm our strategy. What strategy? She snapped, impatient. You know, he said, reading my script. The strategy. To be firm with the sun. Firm about the advanced cognitive decline, the escalating paranoia, and the need for, immediate conservatorship. There was a pause. I heard her sigh, a sound of profound annoyance. Yes, Mark, that's the plan. David is the weak link. He's sentimental. He needs a doctor to tell him his mother is gone. This is a big performance. Don't mess it up. Click. She hung up. I saved the file. Track 1. The conspiracy. The next day. 3:01 p.m. The doorbell rang. This was the second recording. I had the digital recorder hidden under a stack of napkins on the living room table. The air crackled with a new, dangerous energy. Serena swept in. The ritual began. I went to the kitchen. I did the sink routine. Dumped the poison. Poured the prop. I sat down with my fake coffee. My hands were steady now. I was no longer the victim. I was the general, and my army was growing. I played my part. I let a frail tremor enter my voice. Oh, Serena, I said, looking at her with manufactured confusion. I'm just so fuzzy. I saw that email about the doctor tomorrow. David called me this morning. He's just so worried about this Dr. Evans. He thinks it's all moving too fast. Serena's smile tightened. She took the bait, irritation flashing in her eyes. She sat on the edge of the sofa, leaning in, her voice dropping to that cruel, conspiratorial whisper I now knew so well. David is just being sensitive, she said, patting my hand. Her touch felt like ice. Don't you worry your pretty little head about it, Martha. This is for your own good. You've been so forgetful lately. She leaned in closer, her voice barely audible. That's why this coffee is so important. Make sure you drink this all up now. It has that special medicine in it to help with your forgetfulness. Gotcha. The moment the front door closed, I stopped the recording. Track 2, the act. I had it. Her own words. The conspiracy and the crime itself. That evening, I called my son. My voice was a perfect instrument of frail, loving concern. David, honey, I said, letting my voice crack. I've been doing a lot of thinking about my health, about the future. I think you and Serena are right. Oh, Mom, he said, his voice flooding with relief. I'm so glad. It's time, I whispered. Can you and Serena come for dinner tomorrow night? There are some decisions I need to make. I need you both here. The bait was set. They were expecting a surrender. They were expecting a senile old woman to hand over the keys to her life. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush. It was the longest day of my life. Every tick of the grandfather clock was a countdown. I moved through the hours with a strange out-of-body calm. I was an actor preparing for a command performance. I went to the grocery store. I bought the ingredients for David's favorite meal: pot roast, mashed potatoes, and green beans. A meal of love and tradition. A meal that would serve as the backdrop for the most brutal betrayal imaginable. As I cooked, my mind was a whirlwind of strategy. I had to control the narrative. I had to anticipate her every move. I knew Serena. She was a master of public relations. She would have a plausible, heartfelt explanation for everything. A simple accusation would be a pebble against her fortress wall. I needed a battering ram. At 7 p.m., right on time, the doorbell rang. I opened it. Serena was carrying a bouquet of white lilies. "For the house," she said, smiling. Like at a funeral, I thought. David had a bottle of my favorite red wine. They were the picture of a perfect, loving family, coming to support their aging mother through a difficult emotional decision. "Mom, this smells amazing," David said, kissing my cheek. His hug was tight, full of a love that was, for now, hopelessly blind. "Martha, you shouldn't have gone to all this trouble," Serena said, arranging the lilies in a vase with a practiced, elegant hand. "You should be resting." The dinner was a surreal performance. We talked about the weather, about David's latest architectural project, about the charity gala Serena was planning. The conversation was a placid lake, but underneath, I could feel the powerful, dangerous currents of what was to come. I ate little, my stomach a tight knot of anxiety. I watched them, my son, so full of love, and his wife, a monster wearing the face of an angel. After the plates were cleared, the moment came. "Let me get that for you, Martha," Serena chirped, her voice full of practiced care as she stood up and walked to the kitchen. "You just sit tight. Coffee time." I let her. I watched her from the dining room, my heart a trip hammer against my ribs. I saw her open the cabinet, take down my favorite mug, Robert's mug. I saw her turn her back for a moment, her shoulders hiding her hands from my view. I knew what she was doing. She was administering the evening's dose. She returned with the steaming mug, the familiar aroma of cinnamon filling the air. She placed it on the table in front of me, a gentle, beatific smile on her face. "There you go," she said softly. "Drink this. It'll help you relax." David smiled at her, a look of pure, unadulterated adoration on his face. "You're so good to her, honey." I let the mug sit. The steam curled into the air like a phantom. I folded my hands on the table. My heart was pounding, but my voice, when I spoke, was as cold and clear as ice. "Serena." I looked her directly in the eye, cutting through the warm domestic fog. "There's something I need to ask you, and I need you to be honest with me." David frowned, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Serena's smile remained perfectly in place, but her eyes, I noticed, grew still and watchful. "Of course, Martha. Anything." I took a deep breath. "What did you put in my coffee?" The silence that followed was absolute. A vacuum. David stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, a look of shocked, horrified disbelief on his face. But Serena did not deny it. She did not act confused. She did not laugh it off. She did something so brilliant, so audacious, so utterly unbelievable that for a moment I almost admired her sociopathic genius. Her face, her perfectly composed, beautiful face, crumpled. It was a masterful performance. Her lower lip began to tremble. Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't look at me. She turned to David, her entire body seeming to shrink with a theatrical, heartbreaking grief. She grabbed his arm, her manicured fingers digging into his sleeve. "Oh, David," she sobbed, her voice a choked, broken whisper. "Oh my God. David." "She's getting worse." David's confusion instantly morphed into protective concern. "What?" "Serena, honey, it's happening," she cried, burying her face in his shoulder. "This is it. This is exactly what Dr. Evans warned us about. The paranoia. It's taking over." It was a checkmate, a move so unexpected and so devastatingly effective that it left me breathless. She wasn't denying the accusation. She was confirming it, twisting it into a symptom of the very disease she had been inducing. David, my poor manipulated son, reacted exactly as she knew he would. He put his arm around her, his face a mask of disappointment and raw frustration, directed entirely at me. "Mom, what is wrong with you?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Stop this! You're scaring Serena. Dr. Evans told us this might happen. He said you might start having delusions, that you become suspicious of the people closest to you. Why would you accuse the one person in the world who takes care of you every single day?" He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. "That's it. I'm done. We're calling Dr. Evans right now. You need help, Mom. We need to get you proper care before you hurt someone." David's face was a mask of misguided, protective rage. His thumb was hovering over the contact name, Dr. Evans, on his phone. He was ready to save his wife from his crazy mother. "You're right, David," I said, my voice a blade, cutting through his fury. "Let's get some help in here." As David held the phone to his ear, listening to it ring, I walked to the front door. I opened it. Jamal was standing on the porch. He was clean, composed, and wearing a new coat I had bought for him. He looked nervous, his eyes darting from me to David, but he stood tall. David stared, his phone still at his ear. Who in the hell is this?" "Mom, what did you do?" "This," I said, "is my first witness." Jamal stepped into the room. Serena's sobs stopped, instantly, as if a switch had been flipped. Her head snapped up, her eyes red from fake tears widened. Her face went pale. She knew exactly who he was. "Jamal," I said, my voice gentle, "will you please tell my son what you told me?" Jamal looked at David, his voice quiet but clear. "I'm on the street near the Courtyard Cafe. Most days, I see her." He nodded his head towards Serena, who looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Most afternoons. She sits at the table by the window. She crushes up pills, little white pills, and she stirs the powder into that silver thermos." Serena found her voice. It was no longer the soft, gentle coo of a caregiver. It was sharp, cold, and dripping with venom. "This is insane!" she spat, dropping the grieving act completely. The transformation was terrifying. "Who is this? A homeless drug addict? A filthy vagrant?" "David, can you believe this? Your mother is so far gone. She's paying street trash to back up her delusions." She had played her next card, discredit the witness. It was a good move, a predictable one. David looked torn, his world splitting in two. "Mom, what is this?" "You're right, David," I said, turning to my son, whose face was a canvas of confusion and pain. "It's my word against your perfect wife's. It's a homeless boy's word against a successful PR executive. Who are you going to believe?" I let the question hang in the air, a terrible, impossible choice. "So," I said, "I brought a third witness." I reached into the pocket of my apron and pulled out the small, sleek digital recorder. I placed it on the dining room table. It was a tiny object, but it seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Serena's eyes locked onto it, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine, raw fear. "After I got the lab results back," I said, watching her face, "I decided that I needed to be more careful. I started recording Serena's daily visits for my own protection. I pressed the play button. Serena's bright, cheerful, conspiratorial voice filled the silent room. That's why this coffee is so important. Make sure you drink this all up now. It has that special medicine in it to help with your forgetfulness. David's face went ashen. Special medicine? He whispered, looking at his wife. And then, I said, there's the doctor you were calling. I pressed play on the second track. This time, it was Mark the actor's voice, followed by Serena's. Mark. Just want to confirm our strategy? Firm about the advanced cognitive decline, escalating paranoia, need for immediate conservatorship. Serena. Yes, Mark, that's the plan. David is the weak link. He needs a doctor to tell him his mother is gone. This is a big performance. Don't mess it up. The silence that followed was a living thing. It was the sound of a world being utterly and completely destroyed. The recordings were irrefutable. Her own words, calmly and methodically laying out her plan to have me declared insane. David slowly, so slowly, turned his head and looked at his wife. He wasn't looking at the perfect, caring angel he had adored for years. He was seeing, for the very first time, the monster that lived behind the mask. And the mask, with nowhere left to hide, finally shattered. Serena's face, her beautiful, carefully composed face, contorted into a snarl of pure, unrestrained rage. The transformation was horrifying. The soft, caring eyes turned into hard, glittering chips of hate. "You old bitch!" she shrieked, her voice a raw, ugly sound. "You were supposed to be a senile old fool. You were supposed to just fade away." She lunged, not at me, but at the recorder on the table, her manicured nails like claws. Serena's lunge was fast, the movement of a cornered animal. She was no longer a PR executive. She was pure primal rage. But David, snapping out of his frozen shock, moved faster. He grabbed her arm, his grip iron. "Serena, stop!" She whirled on him, her fury now directed at the man she had so expertly manipulated. "Don't you touch me!" she screamed, her voice raw and ugly, a sound I had never heard before. "This is your fault. You're weak. If you had just been a man and convinced her to sell this house a year ago, I wouldn't have had to do any of this." And there it was. The motive. It wasn't about my health or my well-being. It wasn't for my own good. It was about my house, my assets, my money. I wasn't a mother-in-law. I was an obstacle, an inconvenient breathing asset that needed to be liquidated. David stared at the screaming, unrecognizable woman he had married. He looked at her, and then he looked at me, his eyes filled with a horror and a shame so profound it was like a physical wound. He had been her accomplice, her willing, blind, loving accomplice. He let go of her arm. His voice, when he spoke, was dead, hollow. "Get out," he whispered. "What?" she sneered, trying to regain control. "Get out," he said, louder this time, his voice breaking. "Get out of my mother's house. Now." It took another 10 minutes of screaming, of threats and accusations. She threatened to sue me, to ruin me, to tell everyone I was a crazy old woman who had framed her. But it was too late. The truth was out. A poisonous gas that had filled the room, and she was the one suffocating. She finally stormed out into the night, her perfect life in ruins. The front door slammed shut, and the silence that descended was heavy, thick with the wreckage of our family. David sank into a chair, his head in his hands, and began to sob. They weren't the quiet sobs of a sad man. They were the deep, ragged, soul-shattering sobs of a man whose entire world had been detonated. Jamal and I stood there, two unlikely witnesses to the complete implosion of a man's life. I walked over and placed a hand on my son's shaking shoulder. The road back for us would be long and painful, but for the first time in a very long time, it would be real. 6 months later, the grandfather clock in my hallway was still ticking, a steady, comforting rhythm in a world that had been irrevocably changed. The quiet in my house was different now. It was no longer the lonely, managed silence of my recent past. It was the peaceful, earned silence of a life reclaimed. The legal fallout for Serena had been swift and brutal. Faced with Anna's certified toxicology report, the 2 digital recordings, and the full terrified confession of the actor, Mark Jennings, she had pleaded guilty to a slew of charges, including elder abuse, aggravated assault, and conspiracy. Her picture had been in the papers. The beautiful, charitable PR executive revealed to be a cold, calculating sociopath. She was serving a 7-year sentence in a state correctional facility. The perfect life she had been so desperate to build had become a 6-by-9-foot cell. David had filed for divorce the day after the confrontation. The process had been a painful but necessary amputation. He was a changed man. The easy, confident charm was gone, replaced by a quieter, more thoughtful humility. He was in therapy, working through the guilt and the shame of his own willful blindness. Our relationship was healing, slowly, carefully, like a broken bone being set. Our weekly phone calls were no longer about managing me. They were about understanding each other. He was finally seeing me, not as an aging parent to be handled, but as the strong, capable woman I had always been. But the biggest change in my life was sitting across from me at my kitchen table. Jamal was no longer the weary, invisible boy from the bookstore doorway. He was a young man with a future. He had a spark in his eye, a confidence in his posture that hadn't been there before. After that terrible night, I couldn't just let him walk back onto the streets. He had risked everything to save me, a stranger who had shown him a small kindness. His courage deserved more than just a thank you. I discovered he was brilliant. He had a mind for numbers and a near photographic memory, skills he had honed to survive on the streets. He had dropped out of high school when his foster family had kicked him out on his 18th birthday. But his hunger to learn was ravenous. I made a decision. The money I had carefully saved for a comfortable, quiet retirement, for cruises and garden tours, and all the things David and Serena had insisted I should be doing, had a new purpose. I used a significant portion of it to set up a trust for Jamal. It wasn't a handout. It was an investment. The trust would pay for his housing, his tuition at community college, and his living expenses on the condition that he maintained his grades and met with his financial advisor, me, once a week. He was now enrolled in an accounting program, and he was at the top of his class. The depreciation formula is still giving me some trouble, he said, pushing a textbook across the table toward me. Can you walk me through it one more time? I smiled. This was our new ritual. Twice a week, he would come over for dinner, and we would work on his homework. He was the son I was mentoring, and I was the stable, guiding presence he had never had. We had, in the strangest of ways, become family. I picked up the coffee pot from the stove. The rich, dark aroma filled my kitchen. It was my own blend, a simple, unadulterated coffee I had brewed myself. I refilled his mug, then my own. The silver thermos Serena used to bring was long gone, its tainted legacy banished from my home. We sat there for a long time, the afternoon sun streaming through the kitchen window. The only sounds the ticking of the clock and the quiet scratching of Jamal's pencil on his worksheet. It was a simple, peaceful scene, but it was a victory. Serena had tried to use coffee as a poison, a tool to isolate and erase me. But she had failed. In the end, that simple daily ritual had become the very thing that saved me. It had become a symbol not of betrayal, but of trust, of resilience, and of the enduring power of a single, unexpected act of human kindness. I took a sip from my mug. The coffee was warm, strong, and blessedly, perfectly safe. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.